tell me he was okay and the suspect was handcuffed at that.
I'm sorry, let me stop you right there. So at this point, and this is after, let's just call it, so we can agree on our terms, after your foot has struck Mr. Hollins.
Yes, ma'am.
At this point, you know he's in handcuffs.
Yes,
fair to
ma'am.
say? And then you continue with the gun, even though you knew he was in handcuffs.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then we talked earlier about close quarters. Is it fair to say that your training, the training that you had, gave you very limited circumstances about when a gun could be in close contact with somebody's head?
We weren't necessarily trained on it, they discussed it, but we never really received actual training on it. They did talk about instances like being in close proximity or a hostage or a SWAT call, where you could press a gun to someone's head, yes.
Okay, and again, we talked about how this wasn't a hostage situation or a SWAT call.
Correct.
Fair to say that most of your use of your gun training, firearms training, was where you were taught to shoot it from a distance, fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So nobody, what I'm trying to say or ask you is, at any point in time, when you taught to put a gun to somebody's head, as a result of a traffic stop?
As a result of a traffic stop, no.
Okay.
If responding to a fight, a potential may arise, yes.
And what was the potential here?
Sergeant was fighting somebody, that's all I knew. I was running up on the situation, or that's the only information I had coming up. I didn't know if the man was armed, not armed, handcuffed, not handcuffed.
And you didn't stop to look?
I assessed as I was running up.
Did you stop to look?
No, ma'am.
And also fair to say that, in basic terms, stomping, kicking, stepping on somebody's head, that's not a A-frame kick, and that's an A-frame kick or a peroneal kick, is it?
No.
Now, you had said that you had OC spray, but I believe you said you left it in your patrol car, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
So that would have been a less drastic option you could have used if it had been present.
Potentially.
And an aspeton, you had your aspeton as well,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? You could you press them down with the aspeton?
We weren't trained to press people down with an aspeton, I believe. We were trained to strike them with it, and I believe that would have been a more drastic option than using my foot to push him down, yes.
Well, you also agree with me, you weren't trained to kick him by the head either.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So let's go back to the aspeton. Aspeton is something that you're taught to use, correct? It's one of the tools in your arsenal.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You're also taught, in terms of an aspeton, you're not to strike anybody in the head or the neck or the spine. Is that fair to say?
Unless deadly force is authorized, yes.
Okay, so in that situation, did not present itself here, did it?
But that, no, I did not.
Okay. Now, instead of, I guess, another option you could have used your knee to press him down rather than your foot.
And I did use my knee. After I pushed him back down on my foot initially, I saw he was handcuffed, and I think he did roll back up again. And at that point, I used my knee to push him down again and broke him down while we searched him.
Was his body bucking up and down? Was he jerking?
No, ma'am, he was rolling. His shoulders were rolling up, though.
So, and you said that. I guess my question was, have you arrested people before whose bodies were out of control?
Yes, probably.
Okay, kicking, flailing, arms, you have to actually physically catch somebody's hand, put in handcuffs. You had that situation and you're ever under arrest?
Can't think off the top of my head, but possibly.
Okay. Well, let's say you're dealing with a difficult person to put in the handcuffs. Doesn't your training teach you that you should use the less restrictive method of force first? You start there.
Yes.
So again, you could have used your hands to push him down. And we talked about that before.
I considered it, but considering the fact that I had my pistol in my hands, I didn't want to, for that time, possibly have him reach up and grab my gun, so I used my foot to push him down from there.
Okay, so you considered using your hands, fair to say, in your assessment?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, I mean, you're considering using your hands, so in your mind at least, you're assessing that your hands would work. Is that a fair statement?
I considered the option, but ultimately thought it's not going to work because I got my gun in my hands. I need to keep my eyes looking in case somebody else is out there. I just was gonna use my foot to push him flat on the ground.
Would it a simpler thing to be a gun and your training would have told you to holster your weapon?
Not necessarily. I still don't know if this guy's armed trying to get a weapon out of his waistband.
Well, you wouldn't know because you didn't take time to assess what was going on, did you?
I did assess as I was running up.
Did you ask the sergeant, does he have a gun?
No,
Did you ask the sergeant, did he try to hit you?
no,
Do you do anything to inquire what's going on when you're running out, other than just running up?
I looked at the scene, looked at what was going on in just a few seconds.
But again, there's no active fight when you get there.
No active fight, but once again, he's rolling up on the side.
Okay. What about that as active resistance?
When we're trying to prone handcuff somebody, we want them flat on the ground.
Okay. But you didn't know he was in handcuffs, correct?
You know, that's why when he was rolling up on the side, I figured we need to get this guy flat on the ground where we can handcuff him.
Okay. What about turning back as active resistance, if you didn't know what orders had been given?
Like I explained, he was rolling on the side.
Okay. I guess my question is, what part of did you see him jerk up? Did he do that? His
No.
whole body?
No,
Did you see him wrestling around with his handcuffs?
I didn't see he was in handcuffs.
Did you see him reach? Did you see him reach for anybody's weapon?
No,
Let me ask you about, we got distracted here. Let me go back to the report. You say Sergeant Bongiovanni was winded and not able to verbally let me know what was going on. Well, I guess it's a couple questions. If he's winded and can't tell you what's going on, I guess my question is, when did you realize he was winded?
Well, running up, he appeared out of breath, and later on, he had told me, hey, like, I said, Sergeant, I didn't know he was cuffed. He said, Mac, I should have stopped. If I would have stopped you, but I couldn't breathe. I was trying to catch my breath. That's why I didn't tell you to stop when you were running up.
When is that conversation?
Later on in the day.
What time of day? Okay. You didn't tell Price or Pryor about him being winded, did you?
I can't recall if I did or did not.
Well, you heard them testify. Did they say anything about those statements?
No, ma'am.
So fair to say, that statement about the sergeant being winded and not being able to tell you what was going on, you and Bongiovanni had conferred after this had happened.
That ain't my assessment when I was running up and he appeared to be breathing heavy, yes.
Have you confirmed have you talked to Bongiovanni about what had happened after this moment in time out on the street?
We did, yes.
Okay, and you had reviewed the video before you wrote your report also?
Yes.
You also put down here at the bottom on State's Exhibit 62, you put that he was not handcuffed. Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am, that would have been my assessment of the citizen while I was coming up to him. He was not handcuffed.
Okay. You didn't feel it necessary to put any kind of notation that you realized he was handcuffed or when on this notation?
I believe, once again, that's a drop-down menu and you have limited options with it.
Okay. And you didn't put anything in your use of force report about using the weapon, did you?
No, ma'am, we were never required to put anything in the use of force report about pointing the weapon unless we actually discharged it.
Okay. But wouldn't you agree with me that that would be a detail that had happened that you could have put in there?
Not necessarily. The use of force report is just to the facts of what you saw and what you did. As far as anything miscellaneous like that, it really didn't nothing wrong with that.
Wouldn't the use of a weapon, such as you described, wouldn't that constitute a show of force?
Show of force, yes.
Yes. Now, when you speak with Price, Mr. Price, you didn't mention either the kick or the gun to him either, did you?
No, it was a brief conversation in the hallway.
Okay. And then when you speak with Pryor again, you didn't mention the weapon at that point either.
I did mention to her that I did have my gun out when I ran up on the scene. That's why I used my foot. I explained it that way to her.
Now, you had the opportunity, well, let me ask you this. Mr. Pryor had told, now we went off to Pryor, you remember having a conversation with her about assessing the scene and needing to slow down? Remember that conversation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You remember the conversation where she told you that the kick was not what GCPD trains?
I believe she did say something like that, yes.
Okay. Now, to go back to, you said that you may have touched the back of his head with the gun. What does it you mean when you said that?
It may have touched him once or twice. I wasn't digging it into the back of his head. I wasn't pressing it hard against him. But it may have touched him while I was moving.
The barrel of the gun touched his head?
It probably would have been my flashlight. My weapon light stuck off the end about half an inch maybe.
Okay. Now, does your training, and you go back to, did you have any training about the danger of putting a gun to somebody's head? If they moved, the gun could go off, for example.
Potentially, yes, but my finger wasn't on the trigger. It wasn't anywhere near the trigger.
Did you have that training?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Well, you remember your finger wasn't on the trigger, but, would you agree with me, there's other details that you didn't remember? You didn't remember how long the gun was down there and other things that you testified about, is that fair to say?
I mean, you would go count on the video how long the gun was down there, but I can't tell you for certain how long it was down there.
What did you say to Mr. Hollins?
It was something short, something along the lines of don't move, stop moving.
While the gun was in his direction?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you were terminated, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the date of your termination? What was the date?
April 13th, 2017.
Now, were you aware that several criminal cases had been dismissed based upon your firing and Sergeant Von Giovanni's firing?
I believe someone told me later on this.
You know how many cases got dismissed?
No, ma'am.
How many arrests do you think you had made in the beginning part of 2017?
Maybe over 20, I'm not sure.
Okay. Now, going back through the policy, would you agree with me that 503 requires that any type of force, show of force, use of force has to be reasonable and necessary? That's what the department teaches. Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Just one moment, Your Honor. Nothing further at this time.
Yes, sir.
The state, in its cross-examination, continually used the word kicking in the head, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was it your intent to kick anyone in the head?
No, sir, absolutely not.
Was it your intent to cause harm to Mr. Hopper?
No, sir.
Was it your intent?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object to the leading questions. You need to ask more open-ended questions.
Well, okay, I don't think it's legal when I asked, was this your intent? Thank you, Judge. Was it your intent to exact some type of revenge on Mr. Hopper?
Absolutely not.
Was it your intent to punish Mr. Hopper?
No, sir.
Was it your intent to administer justice on the side of the road?
No, sir.
So when the state was using the word kicking in the head in their cross-examination, you don't agree with that assessment, correct?
No, sir.
The state also said that you were dispatched to a traffic stop, correct?
Correct.
You weren't dispatched to that, were you?
No, sir. It was a fight call.
So you were not dispatched to a 37, you were not dispatched until there was a 29 officer fighting, correct?
Yes, sir. It was a traffic stop turned into a fight between the officer and the subject.
And the time frame of what we're talking about I want to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 34, which is the CAD sheet, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's what was played on the audio back to the jury in your testimony, correct?
Yes, sir.
At 15:57:52, what did you do?
I told radio I was en route to the scene.
All right. And that's on the bottom of the first page, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Here, when is the next time you're shown on this?
I'm not shown necessarily, but it's 1603. There's a fire call associated, and that was when I radioed and said single 4 ambulance for one tased or something along those lines.
So you had been on the scene for a period of time, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and that's at 1603 seconds associated call, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's the one you heard yourself, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so, when you made that call, where was Mr. Hollins?
We had stood him up and leaned him against the back of his car at that point.
All right. So, in between, anywhere in here, is there a signal flow between 15:57:52 until 16:03?
Code 4.
Yes, go for it, excuse me.
The only thing closer would be at 1558 where he's, 270 says 1095 slow response.
All right. Did you hear that?
That was after we stood him up and put him against the back of the car, I believe.
So that's what you were talking about. So there was no code 4 in between the 15:57:52 when you were dispatched and when you asked for an ambulance because of the taser, correct?
Correct.
The state used the word that you should be attuned to radio traffic in its cross-examination.
Yes, sir.
Would it be fair to say that you were listening to the radio traffic?
I was.
Was there any type of problems with hearing anything that you're aware of?
I was running, things were rattling and jingling on my belt. Cars nearby with the engines running, wind in my ear from running.
All right. And again, you went back up for a signal 29,
Yes, sir, a fight.
a fight call. Now, the scenario training that you took, that you were asked about by the state, was that, how long did that last?
We did it throughout the academy, with a main section of a bunch in a row at the end. It's like a kind of final exam, if you will.
So how many times would you have different scenarios?
Oh, a lot.
Okay. So that doesn't cover all the scenarios you're gonna have out on the street.
Oh, absolutely not.
And consistently, you were taught that, here's your training, but we want you to come back alive.
Yes, sir.
The state asked you about State's Exhibit number 68, 202.09, false or misleading information in the policy, correct?
Yes, sir.
You were never charged with false or misleading information, were you?
No, sir.
In the first indictment, you weren't even charged with that, were you?
No, sir.
In the second indictment, you weren't, were you?
No, sir.
Who was?
Sergeant Bonnie.
And they dismissed the charge, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you heard in the radio traffic, slow the response, where were you in relationship to your sergeant?
I believe we're standing next to him, or I was standing next to him with Mr. Hollins on the back of Mr. Hollins' car, searching him.
Right. Now, when you were asked about your FTO training at the State's Exhibit 71, the state said they didn't want to get all super fancy about it, but then they started asking you about a tyrant. Were you acting as a tyrant out there on the side of the road?
No, sir.
When you had your gun out, the state asked you, wouldn't it have been a better practice to holster your gun? How long would it take you to holster your gun?
No less than a second.
Okay? But that causes you to have to look away, correct?
I wouldn't have to look away necessarily, but it could draw attention away from what I'm doing.
Now, in the videotape, the state started and stopped it at 51 seconds, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Right. And then they ran it all the way through, I believe, 107, correct?
Yes, sir.
And during that whole period of time, Mr. Hollins was still rolled up on his side, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
When did you finally get him prone to the ground?
After, I eventually put my foot on him, he went down and came back up, and we rolled him down. And then after I saw he was handcuffed, I put my knee in his back, keep him from rolling anymore, so we could search him. That time he was flat on the ground.
So when y'all got him down to the ground, is when you searched it, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you immediately holstered your weapon after that?
I did.
De-escalated.
De-escalated.
Now, the state was asking you about close quarters and talking about hostage situations. When you describe this situation as close quarters, is that because y'all were right there together in the area?
Yes, I was on top of the suspect, holding him down so we couldn't keep rolling, and then Sergeant Bonnie was, a foot away from me, and then he was almost right on top while he was searching Mr. Hollins.
And there were other civilian witnesses, correct?
Yeah, there were plenty of cars around.
Right. And you said that you were covering him with a gun, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're not denying that at some point that the gun came in contact with his head area, his shoulder area, or anything like that, are you?
No, sir.
What? But you didn't press it into him.
No, sir, not for any length of time.
And the time that you saw the blood and the injuries was when he was in the car, correct?
Yes, sir, after we put him in the rear of Sergeant Bongiovanni's car.
Would be a fair statement to say that you had been looking at other things while this was going on.
Yes, sir, I wasn't focused on his face.
And then you called for an ambulance.
I did.
Now, in State's Exhibit number 62, you particularly said that you did not see that he was handcuffed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the state asked you to read to the portion, Sergeant Bongiovanni then was able to tell me that he was okay and the suspect was handcuffed. That's what the state asked you to stop reading, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. Read from the rest of that.
I could not tell at any point until then that the suspect was handcuffed due to his bulky clothing and the way he was positioned. I knelt across the suspect's upper shoulders to keep him from rolling over again while Sergeant Bongiovanni searched him for weapons. As soon as Sergeant Bongiovanni was done searching him for weapons, we stood him up. We stood the suspect up, and I called for an ambulance to come to the scene.
Now, when you stood him up, that's when at some point you placed him in the back of the car, correct?
Yes, sir. We leaned him against the trunk of his car, did a more thorough search of his person, and then I walked him over and put him in the back of Sergeant Bongiovanni's car.
Okay. And about the OC spray, you said that when the tasers were issued, a lot of officers just put the OC spray in the cars, correct?
That's correct.
And that's what you did?
Yes, sir.
Would you, is OC spray a step up or a step down from the taser?
I want to say it's about even,
Okay.
right at the same level.
And so you had already seen that the taser had been deployed when you came up upon the scene, correct? Did you continually make an assessment as this was transpiring?
I did.
In the 4 to 5 steps that you had, you made the assessment?
I did. I made the assessment and continued making assessments while the incident unfolded.
And your training was that when you had your weapon out like that, you didn't have your finger on the trigger, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't have your finger on the trigger.
Yes, sir.
Now, we talk about this, you conferred with your sergeant. What did that consist of?
I did. We talked about me doing my use of force report. He told me, look, like, be honest, just say what happened, why you did what you did. At some point, I talked to him about Sergeant. I didn't know he was handcuffed. Never saw he was handcuffed. He's like, yeah, I know that. He was rolled on his side. I should have stopped you, but I was out of breath.
Okay. And that's all the conferring you did?
For the use of force, yes.
All right. Well, you didn't prepare any other reports, did you?
No, sir.
All right. And when you talked to Lieutenant Price and Lieutenant Pryor, you answered the questions they asked you, correct?
Yes, sir.
They didn't ask for any more information, did they?
No, sir.
They just told you to do your report,
Yes, sir.
and that's what you did.
Yes, sir. Lieutenant Pryor told me to do my report.
Are you telling this jury that you feel like your actions were reasonable and necessary?
Yes, sir.
That's all the questions I have.
Recross?
Just real briefly, so you're saying that he wasn't, I guess he wasn't complying when you came up, based upon turning a little behind?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, are you familiar with, misdemeanor obstruction?
I am, yes.
Basically, not following officer's commands, that's one version of misdemeanor obstruction.
Yes,
Is that fair
ma'am.
to say? You didn't take a warrant out from Mr. Holmes for misdemeanor obstruction, did you?
I didn't take any more stuff from Mr. Holmes.
Now, you said you put your foot on his shoulder, is that fair to say?
That was my intent.
But would you also agree with me that your knee came up, did it not?
It did.
Okay. Would you agree with me there's a difference between placing your foot and your knee coming up?
The way he was rolling on his side, his shoulder probably that high off the ground, I had to bring my foot up a good bit to clear his shoulder.
Where in the video is his whole body coming all the way up that you had to bring your knee up?
His shoulders,
The shoulders are up.
yes, ma'am.
And you grabbed the car door off of it.
I didn't.
Grabbing the car door, fair to say, it helped you brace your foot.
I'm not sure why I grabbed the car door. I said I didn't realize I did it until last week.
Right. So it sounds like there's quite a few actions that you took that you weren't sure why you did them, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
That's right.
We agree.
That's looking back in hindsight, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's not what you were assessing, or what you thought was right there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, you're wrong.
You can go down, sir.
Yes, sir.
For the record, Judge, just to be sure, I think all of it is being admitted. Defendants exhibit number, we would tender defendants exhibit number 1, which has the one video or the audio that's played. Defendants exhibit number 2, which is the Kenneth Dillard's interview. Defendants exhibit number 3, Judge, which was for the record only. That's that other file.
You say 3 with record on.
Yes, the record only. Defendants exhibit number 5. Defendants exhibit number 5 would be the charge, the case against Mr. Hollis where it was reduced from the felony to misdemeanor by the state. Defendants exhibit number 6, another case against Mr. Hollins. Defendants exhibit number 7, another case against Mr. Hollins. Defendants exhibit number 8, another case against Mr. Hollins. Defendants exhibit number 9, the pending aggravated stalking case against Mr. Hollins. Defendants exhibit number 10, which is the adding line of notice upon the county. Defendants exhibits 11, 12, and 13, which constitute the plea and conviction and transcript of Sergeant Von Giovanni. And defendants exhibit number 14, which was for the record only, Judge, that being a copy of the notes that Detective Elliott did to the state for the record only. That I just, to perfect the record